Commander stood on the bridge of the warship Dominant Fang, staring at the blue and green planet below. New Terra, the humans called it. Another colony world, another simple conquest. At least, that's what the mission briefing had promised. The Dominion had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Himself had overseen 12 of those campaigns. He knew the pattern well. Show overwhelming force, destroy a few targets, and the population would surrender within hours. Sometimes they begged. Sometimes they offered tribute, but they always surrendered. "Sir, we're in position," Lieutenant A reported from her station. Her mandibles clicked softly, a sign of routine boredom. This was supposed to be an easy assignment. Nodded and opened a communication channel to the planet below. His translator device converted his words into the human language. "Attention, New Terra colony. This world now belongs to the Dominion. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. Evacuate your settlement centers and gather in the designated areas. Resistance will be met with immediate force." The response came quickly, a human voice, male and tired sounding. "This is Governor of New Terra. We are a peaceful settlement of families. We have no military installations. We formally request that you leave our space." Secondary arms twitched with irritation. They always tried to negotiate at first. "You have 59 minutes. He closed the channel and turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare bombardment pattern Alpha 7. Target the outer agricultural zones. Nothing lethal, just enough to demonstrate our capability." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this dozens of times before, warning shots to scare the population. Then the real demands would begin. The first plasma bolt streaked down from orbit, striking the fields 3 kilometers from the main settlement. Massive plumes of earth and fire erupted into the sky. The explosions were visible from space, angry red flowers blooming on the planet's surface. "Sir, monitoring civilian response," A said, adjusting her sensors. Then her voice changed, became uncertain. "Sir, this is unusual." "Move to our station. Explain." "The humans aren't scattering. They're not evacuating randomly. She paused, manipulating the sensor data to get a clearer picture. "They're forming groups, organized groups around the smaller heat signatures." "Smaller signatures?" "Their offspring, sir, the juveniles." Watched the data with growing confusion. In every previous conquest, threatened populations followed predictable patterns. Adults fled first, being more valuable. They could always produce more young. Some species would abandon their juveniles entirely if it meant survival. That was logical. That was natural selection. But these humans were doing something different. The larger heat signatures, the adults, were positioning themselves between the juveniles and the direction of the bombardment. They were creating physical barriers with their own bodies. "Intensify scans on Settlement Sector 7, ordered. I want visual confirmation." The shifted to show an image of the human colony. The settlement was modest, perhaps 50,000 inhabitants. Simple buildings, wide streets, parks with vegetation. It looked like a peaceful place where families raised their young. Now those streets were filled with organized chaos. Human adults ran in every direction, but not to save themselves. They were gathering children, dozens of them, and forming protective clusters. Some adults lay flat on top of the small humans, creating shields with their own flesh. Others stood at the edges of groups, facing outward toward the source of danger. "Target secondary bombardment at grid reference 442, commanded. "Closer to the settlement. Let them see what real force looks like." The plasma bolts fell like hammer strikes from an angry god. Buildings on the outer edge of the settlement exploded into fragments. The shockwave rippled outward, throwing debris in all directions. Expected panic. He expected the protective formations to break apart as self-preservation took over. Instead, the formations tightened. Adult humans pulled the juveniles closer, curling their bodies around them. One group near a damaged building caught his attention. A female human threw herself across 3 small children as a wall collapsed. The rubble crashed down on her back. The impact would have broken bones, possibly ruptured organs. When the dust cleared, she was still moving, still maintaining her protective position. Other adults rushed forward, not to help her, but to cover more children while she was incapacitated. "By the void," a whispered. "She's still covering them. She's injured, possibly dying, and she's still." "I can see that, Lieutenant," snapped. But his voice lacked its usual authority. He was seeing it too, and it disturbed him in ways he couldn't articulate. At a school building near the settlement center, a different scene unfolded. Adult humans formed a living chain from the building to a reinforced bunker 200 meters away. They passed children hand to hand, creating a human tunnel with their bodies. When debris fell, the adults took the impacts on their backs and shoulders, never breaking the chain, never dropping a single juvenile. Had studied human military history. They were capable warriors when pressed, but this wasn't a military installation. These were civilians, farmers, teachers, merchants, people with no combat training, and they were organizing like veteran soldiers, but not to fight, to protect. "Send another volley," ordered, his voice quieter now. "Grid reference 338. This strike hit closer to a residential area. An entire row of homes collapsed in flames. The sensor data showed dozens of casualties, but again, the pattern repeated. Adults positioned between danger and young, bodies as shields, no one running to save themselves. A visual feed showed a human male, elderly by their species standards. He had white hair and moved slowly. By logic, he was expendable, too old to fight, too old to produce offspring. He should have been abandoned first. Instead, the old human positioned himself at the entrance to a shelter where dozens of children were being evacuated. When falling debris threatened the entrance, he used his own body to brace against it, holding it back while others pulled children to safety. The weight was clearly too much for him. His legs trembled, then buckled. The debris crushed him slowly, but he held it long enough for the last child to be pulled clear. Made a sound had never heard from her before, something between a gasp and a keen of distress. He looked around the bridge and saw his entire crew staring at their displays with expressions of confusion and mounting horror. "Sir," I said softly, "permission to speak freely." Nodded, unable to tear his eyes from the screens. "What are we doing?" It was a simple question, a dangerous question, the kind of question that could end careers or worse, but didn't reprimand her because he was asking himself the same thing. "We are following our orders," he said, but the words felt hollow. "We are bringing this world into the Dominion. By killing their adults while they protect their young." A's voice cracked. "Sir, I've served in 8 campaigns. I've never seen anything like this. They're not soldiers, they're parents." Watched the screen where another group of humans was gathering children into a basement shelter. A pregnant female was helping, her movements slow and careful, but she still positioned herself on the outside of the group, between the juveniles and danger. They had a word for what he was feeling, though it was rarely used in military contexts. Al. It meant the uncomfortable recognition that one's actions might be wrong, that the enemy might not be the enemy at all. "Maintain bombardment pattern," ordered, his voice mechanical. "Increase intensity by 20%. They'll break. They have to break." But even as he gave the order, watching another volley of plasma fire descend toward the planet, he wondered which of them would break first, the humans below or his own crew watching them die. The bombardment continued into the night, and the humans never stopped shielding their children. 3 days passed, 3 days of steady bombardment, 3 days of watching humans die protecting their young, had stopped sleeping. He couldn't close his eyes without seeing them. The parents, the teachers, the elderly, the strangers who threw themselves over other people's children without hesitation. The colony still hadn't surrendered. Governor's communications had stopped after the first day. Intelligence suggested he was dead, buried in the rubble of the administration building, while helping evacuate a center that had been in the basement. Approached command chair. Her movements were slow, exhausted. The entire bridge crew looked the same. Hollow eyes, slumped postures. They were warriors of the Dominion, conquerors of worlds, but they looked like they'd been defeated. "Sir, casualty report from the surface." Took the data pad without looking at it. He already knew the numbers would be high. Summarize. 412 adult humans confirmed dead. Approximately 2,000 injured, many critically. Structural damage to 40% of the settlement. She paused. Juvenile casualties, 19. Head snapped up. 19, that's impossible. We've been striking for 3 days. No, sir, it's accurate. The humans have maintained protective formations throughout the entire bombardment. They're cycling adults through the most dangerous positions, rotating so no one person is exposed too long, but ensuring there's always a body between the juveniles and the strikes. They've created an entire system. They're treating it like a military operation, except their objective isn't to win. It's to shield their young. Pulled up the sensor feeds. What he saw made his stomach turn. The humans had transformed their entire settlement into an intricate network of sacrifice. Bunkers were layered with adults on the outside, children deep inside. Supply runs were executed with adult escorts who literally covered the juveniles with their bodies during movement. Damaged buildings were being reinforced not with materials, but with human beings acting as structural supports while children sheltered beneath them. One feed showed a hospital that had taken a direct hit 2 days ago. The medical staff had died protecting their patients. Now the surviving patients, those who could move, were protecting the children who'd been brought there. Injured humans with broken limbs and burns used their bodies to shield young ones from falling debris. "Show me School Sector 4, ordered. The screen changed to show what remained of the colony's primary school. The building was half-collapsed, but the playground had been converted into an emergency shelter. 47 adults surrounded approximately 200 children in a tight defensive formation. They'd been there for almost 6 hours since the last major strike nearby. As watched, his weapons officer executed another bombardment run. The plasma bolt struck close, too close. The heat wave from the explosion rolled across the playground like a visible wall of death. The 47 adults didn't scatter. They tightened their formation, locking arms, creating a dome of flesh and bone over the children. The heat washed over them, could see their bodies burning. The sensors registered catastrophic temperatures, but they didn't move. Not one of them broke formation. When the heat dissipated, 12 were still standing. The others had collapsed, their bodies charred and broken. But they'd done it. They'd absorbed enough of the heat that the children beneath survived. As watched in stunned silence, medical teams rushed forward, not to help the fallen adults first, but to evacuate the children they'd died protecting. "Sir," A's voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, I can't do this anymore." Looked at her. His second-in-command, decorated veteran of 20 campaigns, was crying, actual tears streaming down her face. Around the bridge, he saw similar scenes. His tactical officer had his head in his hands. His weapons officer was staring at her console like it was a weapon pointed at her. "Lieutenant, control yourself," said, but there was no force in the words. "No, sir, respectfully no," A straightened. "I'm watching parents burn alive for their children. I'm watching grandparents crush themselves to save juveniles. I'm watching teachers die in place of students, and we're the ones killing them. We're the monsters in this scenario." They could surrender, argued, but even he didn't believe it anymore. Would the Dominion surrender if it meant our young were spared? Or would we calculate that adults are more valuable, abandon the juveniles, and save ourselves? A's mandibles trembled. "I know the answer, sir. So do you." Pulled up another feed. This one showed a human male pulling himself across broken ground. Both his legs were clearly shattered, twisted at unnatural angles. He was leaving a trail of blood behind him. With just his arms, he dragged himself toward a crater where 4 children huddled, crying. Another strike was incoming. The trajectory calculations appeared on screen. The impact zone included that crater. The human wouldn't make it in time. It was mathematically impossible. But the human didn't stop. He clawed at the ground, pulling himself forward, centimeter by centimeter. At the last possible second, he threw himself across the edge of the crater, spreading his arms wide. The plasma bolt struck. The human's body jerked with the impact, absorbed the worst of the blast. When the smoke cleared, he wasn't moving. But the children beneath him were alive, scrambling out from under his corpse, crying and calling for help. Heard someone vomiting. One of his crew had left their station to be sick. No one moved to reprimand them. "Sir, I'm formally requesting that we cease bombardment and offer new terms," I said. "This isn't a military operation anymore. It's an extermination of people whose only crime is loving their children more than their own lives." Wanted to refuse. He wanted to follow his orders, complete the mission, maintain the discipline of the Dominion. But he couldn't stop seeing that human male with the shattered legs, dragging himself to shield children that might not have even been his own. "Request," he said quietly. "Contact Dominion High Command. I need authorization to modify our approach." The response came back within an hour. It was brief and absolute. Continue bombardment until surrender or complete elimination. The Dominion does not negotiate with lesser species. Complete the conquest or face charges of dereliction. Stared at the message for a long time. Then he looked around his bridge at his crew. These were the finest warriors the Dominion had produced. They'd conquered dozens of worlds without hesitation. They were loyal, disciplined, and utterly committed to the Dominion's expansion. And right now they were breaking. He could see it in their eyes. They'd crossed some invisible line, seen something that couldn't be unseen. They'd watched parents die for children, and it had changed something fundamental in them. "Sir," I asked quietly, "what are your orders?" Made a decision that would likely end his life, but he'd already watched too many humans die protecting their young. He couldn't watch anymore. Wouldn't watch anymore. "Cease bombardment," he said. "All weapons offline now." "Sir, High Command ordered." "I know what they ordered, Lieutenant. Cease bombardment." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. His crew stared at him. A's mandibles hung open in shock. "You'll be executed for this," she said. "Probably," agreed. "But I'm not killing any more parents while they shield their children. Record everything we've seen. Every sensor log, every video feed, every scan. Transmit it all." "Transmit it where, sir?" "Everywhere. The fleet, the Senate, allied worlds, neutral worlds. Everyone needs to see what we've seen. Everyone needs to watch what happens when humans protect their young." He stood from his command chair. "Maybe I'm a traitor. Maybe I'm a fool. But I'm not killing another parent today." I was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded and turned to her console, compiling all sensor data, preparing for wide-spectrum broadcast. "Sir," the tactical officer stood abruptly, "if you transmit unedited combat footage without authorization, that's treason. They'll execute your entire command crew." "Then leave," said simply. "I'm not ordering anyone to commit treason with me, but I'm doing this." No one left the bridge. The transmissions went out across every channel. Unedited, unfiltered footage of 3 days of bombardment. Hours of recordings showing humans dying to protect their young. The galaxy watched. The response was immediate and catastrophic for the Dominion. Within hours, his fleet descended into chaos. Crew members on other ships refused orders. Some captains tried to continue the bombardment and found their own crews locking them out of weapon systems. 3 ships declared mutiny. 5 more went silent, their crews presumably arguing about what to do. On the dominant Fang, and 60% of the bridge staff formally. They sealed in the command center, but instead of placing him under arrest, I asked him what they should do next. Deploy medical aid to the surface, said. Save everyone we can. It won't make up for what we've done, but it's a start. The Dominion Senate tried to suppress the footage, but they couldn't. It was already spreading across Allied networks, neutral worlds, even into enemy territory. Everyone was watching. Everyone was seeing what the Dominion did to people who protected their children. The recordings showed everything. Every parent who died shielding their young, every teacher who burned in place of students, every stranger who threw themselves over other people's children without hesitation, the old human who held falling debris while juveniles escaped, the pregnant female who positioned herself on the outer edge of the protective formation, the male with shattered legs who dragged himself to cover children he didn't know. Across space, citizens watched in horror. They saw their military, their proud dominion, trying to kill parents while they protected their young. They saw themselves reflected in those actions and didn't like what they saw. The cultural impact was immediate. They prioritized adults over juveniles. It was logical, practical, evolutionary sound. Adults could always produce more offspring, but watching the humans die to save their young forced an uncomfortable question. Was logic worth more than love? Was practical survival worth more than sacrifice? The political impact came quickly after. 12 Dominion worlds petitioned for independence within the first month. They didn't want to be part of an empire that killed parents protecting their children. The Senate fractured into factions. Some wanted to continue the expansion. Others demanded reforms. A few called for the entire imperial project to be abandoned. Member species began questioning everything. How many worlds had they conquered? How many populations had they destroyed? Had any of those species protected their young the way humans did? Had the Dominion ignored or punished that protection? New Terra became a symbol, not of conquest or resistance, but of something more fundamental. It became the place where the galaxy learned that humanity would die before letting harm come to their children. And in learning that, many species were forced to ask themselves, what would we die for? The cost to New Terra was terrible. 847 adults dead. More than 3,000 injured, most with permanent damage. Buildings destroyed, infrastructure ruined, families shattered. Only 23 children had died, and the surviving adults spoke of those deaths like personal failures that would haunt them forever. When rescue ships from Earth finally arrived, they expected to evacuate the survivors. The colony was devastated, the population traumatized. Surely they would want to leave this place of death and suffering. But the survivors refused. Governor's deputy, a woman named Martinez who'd lost her husband in the bombardment, spoke for them all. We built this place for our children. We died for our children. We're not leaving. This is their home and we're staying to rebuild it. Earth sent supplies, construction equipment, medical support. But they didn't send evacuation ships because none were needed. The people of New Terra stayed and began rebuilding, one brick at a time, one family at a time. Faced execution for mutiny and treason. His trial became the most watched event in Dominion history. It stopped being about his actions and became a referendum on the Dominion itself. What kind of empire were they? What did they stand for? What were they willing to become? His defense was simple and devastating. I watched parents burn alive to save their children. I watched grandparents crushed protecting juveniles. I watched teachers die in place of students, and we were the ones killing them. We weren't the advanced civilization in that scenario. We were the monsters. They were better than us in every way that mattered. The trial divided the Dominion. Some called for his execution as an example. Others called him a hero who'd shown moral courage. The debate raged for months while sat in a cell, waiting for judgment. But the real judgment was happening across the galaxy. The footage from New Terra spread to 40 different species. Military academies started showing it to cadets, not as tactical training but as ethics education. The question posed was always the same. What are you willing to die for? Some species watched and felt shame for their own cultures. Others watched and felt admiration for humanity. A few watched and felt fear, recognizing that any species willing to die for their young would be terrifying in a real war. The galactic community gained a new term, the human protocol. It referred to the absolute protection of juveniles at any cost. Some species adopted it as policy. Others studied it as cultural phenomenon. But everyone knew what it meant. It meant humans would die before letting harm come to their children, and that made them different from everyone else. New Terra recovered slowly. 5 years after the bombardment, the colony had rebuilt most of its infrastructure. The population had actually grown as other humans came to settle there, wanting to be part of the place that had shown the galaxy what humanity meant. A memorial stood in the center of the settlement. It listed the names of every adult who died protecting children during those 3 days. 847 names carved in stone. At the base was a simple inscription. They stood between danger and the defenseless. They did not move. They did not break. They were human. Children played in the parks around the memorial. Adults watched them carefully, always aware, always ready. The trauma of the bombardment hadn't faded, but it had transformed into something else. A collective determination that what happened would never happen again, that children would always be protected, that parents would always shield their young. Was eventually pardoned, though he was exiled from the Dominion. He settled on a neutral world and spent his remaining years writing about what he'd seen. His book, The Day I Learned What Humanity Means, became required reading in 23 different languages across the galaxy. In it he wrote, "We thought humans were weak because they loved their children more than victory. We thought they were foolish because they died to protect their young rather than ensure their own survival. We were wrong. Love isn't weakness. Sacrifice isn't foolish. Humanity didn't gain territory from New Terra. They didn't gain resources or power. They gained something far more valuable. They gained the knowledge that when the galaxy watched them die protecting their children, the galaxy flinched first. And in that moment, we all learned what it truly means to be human." The Dominion never recovered its former power. The fractures that began with New Terra eventually broke the empire into smaller federations. Some of those federations reformed their cultures, placing greater value on protecting the young. Others clung to the old ways and faded into irrelevance. But everyone, across every world, every species, every culture, remembered New Terra. They remembered the parents who died shielding their children from orbital bombardment. They remembered the old human holding up debris with his last strength. They remembered the male with shattered legs dragging himself to cover children he didn't know. They remembered the 47 who locked arms and burned so that 200 children could survive. Humanity didn't conquer the galaxy. They didn't need to. They'd done something more impressive. They'd shown the galaxy what they were willing to die for, and in doing so, they'd changed what it meant to be civilized, what it meant to be strong, what it meant to be worthy of respect. New Terra stood as proof that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won by killing your enemies. Sometimes they're won by being willing to die for your children while the whole galaxy watches. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to change everything.